Yeah, you read the title. Remove yourself from our modern day where gamers literally speedrun Google Maps. Imagine coming across an entirely new land and having absolutely no idea what's on the other side of, like, the forest over there. Could be anything. Could be a mythical lost city of gold. Could be an island full of Amazonian women. And if you were the British, or French, there could be a water passage right through this cold, godforsaken landmass. An inland sea, or even a river that bypassed all the continent stuff, allowing a ship to sail right onto the wealthy lands of Asia. This idea manifested itself as the Northwest Passage, a centuries-long search by explorers to find some way to Asia through North America. It was what inspired Henry Hudson, James Cook, and regrettably, Sir John Franklin. To the fur-trading French and naval-loving British, North America was kind of just this useless piece of rock while the Spanish got all the good parts. Sailing through it, or around it, was the ultimate dream. Whoever would have discovered this passage would have become a Columbus in their own right. The man who would bring the riches of Asia to Britain, France, or maybe even Denmark, because they tried too. Even while more of the continent was mapped, for generations, that dream, or cope, stayed alive because cartographers just kept slapping fictional seas on the map. Perhaps the Northwest Passage was out there. Europeans just hadn't found it yet. So here's an idea. What if that was there? This is so stupid. Context time. There's this image that floats around the internet from time to time, where the Mediterranean Sea is overlaid with North America. It fits perfectly. This is real. I love this image. It's both hilarious and kind of mind-bending. I love this image so much, I approached the other alternate history channels with this same map, and I said, hey, let's make a video about this. And so we are, doing completely different takes on this stupid, stupid map. Why did I do this? Well, I was watching a video from Geography Geek, and he mentioned this little fact.
Multiple Native Americans told English explorer John Smith while he was captured that the sea was only a 5 to 8 days walk away.
Well, what if it actually was? I felt like making a scenario imagining how Europeans would react if they slowly discovered that the New World was kind of exactly like their old world, at least in shape. Like a bizarro mirror world in a way. That'd be funny. This is an alternate world where this exact Google Maps Photoshop was real. This exact Photoshop. And if you look a little closer, you might notice some geographic quirks. The topography is all jumbled together. California is just California. There's the valley and the Sierras. So far so good. As we go west, despite having the coastline of Spain and France, it still remains the Rockies and the barren wasteland we know and love. That is at least until we reach the Alps. All of Italy and the surrounding islands are exactly the same as they are in Europe, and the same can be said for the Balkans too. What normally is Iowa and the Midwest in our world is now the mountainous geographic hellscape that is Southern Europe. Greece is in Missouri. Here's the kicker though. Turkey doesn't have the topography of Turkey. It has the topography of Ohio. Egypt isn't a desert. It's Georgia. The Holy Land is the Carolinas. Really, to simplify things, the way the mapmaker made this was by having the West be topographically similar to Europe, and the East be topographically similar to North America. I'm pretty sure Possible History is going to have a very realistic approach to this scenario, like how a giant ocean in the middle of North America would affect the climate. Let's be honest here, it would change everything, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to treat this kind of like a fantasy map, where the climates are tied to what it looks like. Essentially, if Italy is in Colorado, then it's gonna have the climate of Italy. Turkey is gonna have the climate of Ohio.
What the f does that mean?
So I'm not even gonna do a bit, because the sponsor of today's video is something near and dear to my heart. Storyblocks. Oh man, Storyblocks, the ace up any video editor's sleeve. Storyblocks is a stock media subscription service that gives you access to a massive library of footage and music, entirely copyright free. I use Storyblocks literally every day. I use it for both channels. Sometimes I use it for a clip that I don't want to animate, or perhaps I need just a vague representation of something I'm talking about. Say I talk about a forest. Well, there's a forest. But I also use Storyblocks in ways you might not even know. Like this single fire effect is my absolute favorite. I have used it for like 6 years at this point. Storyblocks' footage works perfectly to overlay on images to create dynamic shots. And because a Storyblocks subscription includes unlimited downloads for a diverse and high-quality footage library, there's always something new to utilize for your videos, with their constantly updating selection. They also have thousands of pre-made video templates for After Effects, Premiere Pro, Apple Motion, and DaVinci Resolve. This might seem more like a niche product if you're not an editor, but if you are an editor, well, you probably already know about Storyblocks. But if you're new and just getting into video making, this service is for you. It'll streamline your work, remove the headache of worrying about copyright, and it'll make your videos look a lot more professional. With clear-cut licensing, you are legally protected when using this footage. So it's just a common sense tool to utilize, and all it takes is a subscription. If you want to get started, click on the link in the description to gain access to this library with unlimited stock media downloads at one set price. Go to storyblocks.com/AlternateHistoryHub. Thanks once again to Storyblocks for sponsoring this video. So, remember all those alternate geography videos? Some real classics for sure. Well, just like with those, I'm not making any real serious predictions here. An excuse to play around with historical dolls using what we know about the past. And first off, I want to talk about the people who were here first. Something like a giant-ass sea in the middle of the continent would probably affect the pre-Columbian population distribution, even down to the first migration of people into the Americas thousands of years ago. Alright, so the specifics about how this migration into North America actually went is still not 100% hammered out by the experts. But the general idea is that the ancestors of modern Native Americans came in through two routes, here and here. In our timeline, the majority of natives settled along the west coast, Mesoamerica, and modern-day Peru. For as much as we know, only a small fraction of the total population in the New World was in what became the mainland United States. In short, very few people lived in the plains and deserts, and a lot of people lived where there were coastlines and rivers. While there were settlements like Cahokia and the Mound Builders, there wasn't a concentration of people like in Mesoamerica. So what I'm getting at here is that in this alternate timeline, North America perhaps sees an entirely alternate migration route and distribution of people, leading to an alternate development of cultures and societies over thousands of years. You see, I see this map, and I just imagine where people would naturally migrate. Now that I think about it, there was a genetic split between groups that became North American and South American after the Beringians came south from the glaciers. See Ancient America's video on that. So perhaps there's a third split here. Maybe a coastal migration goes south and another goes east. If this is the same Mediterranean in shape, I'm just gonna assume that it's the same Mediterranean in water current too, which means that anyone entering from the Strait of Santa Maria would have a relatively easy time going east. We might see a series of splits. First in Beringia, with one people taking a sea route and another going by land. Then another split for both groups, the sea splitting in California and the land splitting in the Alps. So perhaps leading to a settlement sort of like this. That's assuming a lot, and it doesn't take into account migration of big game that these people would certainly be hunting, but it's the best I got. Oh man, I'm just imagining all the alternate megafauna that comes from this too. You know, camels did originate in North America, so maybe in one of these Mediterranean islands, there's some population of camels that suffered from island dwarfism, What new wacky species would these people see? Let your imagination run wild. Going back to the people, I really want to avoid geographic determinism here, as much as possible. Even if these lands were the exact copies of Italy and Greece, we would not get the same results. No native Athens is going to just randomly pop up and invent democracy because that's where Athens was located. Perhaps Mirror Anatolia is the real dominant force here. A flat, fertile landscape able to feed a large population. Maybe there's some great power that rises from the still existing Ohio River. There's a lot of ways you can have fun with this. The Tunisia we know is just kind of the strip of land straddling the inhospitable Sahara. But in America, it would be this green coastline that's also next to a less inhospitable desert. Perhaps northern Mexico is just as well populated as southern Mexico. The natives might not ever build ships that rival the Romans or Phoenicians, but this Mirror Sea could still be dotted with plenty of thriving seafaring people. Some that hop along the coastlines or maybe even venture into open waters in canoes. While that's cool and all, really you can just imagine anything in this map. It's all viable. Perhaps Mirror Croatia creates an environment for a series of city-states, Mayan style. Maybe the island of Cyprus is the center of a prominent seafaring confederation. What becomes of this weird land strip here in what we call the American South? Is this land constantly fought over by different clashing tribes and alliances? Look at the Mirror Bosphorus leading into the Great Lakes. Even if it's not the center of a great city, perhaps it's the meeting point of some alternate native cultural group. I can imagine a larger population existing within Italy, Anatolia, and perhaps Tunisia, at least compared to our timeline's central US. As much as I enjoy theorizing about where these alternate native people might live, I want something a little bit more concrete to focus on. Like maybe how European colonization might be affected by all this. Because if anyone looks at this image, you just know the first thought in their head is how does this affect the United States? Imagine the Spanish coming up from Mexico, and instead of seeing a desert, they just saw another sea. How do you think they'd react? Well, they'd probably react the same way the Spanish do about everything. In Western medieval times, there was once a concept that the world was meant to have balance, physically, with its landmasses. This is why the idea of Terra Australis had remained so prevalent among explorers. If the Northern Hemisphere had so much land, then surely the South has just as much land too. I imagine discovering an exact mirror Mediterranean world would give many early modern explorers much to think about. The fact that there is an exact duplicate of an entire sea would probably bring up a lot of questions. There isn't even a way to explain this naturally, because I made it up. Just imagine that all these little historical sims in this scenario are freaking out, debating among themselves what this mirror world truly means. Is this a holy place? A cursed place? Is Mirror World Georgia actually an unholy land? There's a lot to ponder for our silly scenario people, and as much as I don't want to get into the whole cultural, societal aspect of this, I do want to say this probably creates a few new denominations of Christianity. Pushing this video even more into fiction, let's just assume that this Mediterranean America doesn't cause any effects to the global climate. It doesn't butterfly away any histories because of atmospheric conditions. There's no famine that ruins Charlemagne's kingdom because clouds move differently now. And also, the second Mediterranean doesn't cause ocean levels to drop or alter coastal landscapes. To keep it simple, Eurasian history follows the same exact path as it did in our timeline, which means that Columbus still shows up in 1492. If things change after that, then so be it. Now, right off the bat, Cortez and the Aztecs. There's a possibility that the Spanish might not even run into the Aztecs or Triple Alliance at all. It's theorized using their creation myth that the Aztec came from northern Mexico and migrated south until reaching Lake Texcoco. If there was a nearby green coast, would the Aztec have ever gone north instead of south? Who's to say? If they did go north, then these alternate Spanish conquistadors might come across a Mesoamerica full of prosperous city-states that never unified at all. Or maybe they are unified under an entirely different system. If the city-states aren't unified, then this alternate world doesn't see the Spanish overthrow the Aztec rulers to replace them with their own, nor do they rally around a native coalition that also hated the Aztecs. Either way, without the Aztecs, gaining a foothold in central Mexico would be a much more difficult thing for the Spanish to do, much like how the conquest of the Maya was slower. Hernando de Soto would cross from Florida and immediately discover the eastern coast of the Mediterranean. He'd be the first to perhaps recognize just how similar this new world really was. Maybe he'd even name this new body of water the New Mediterranean or something. In our timeline, while Spain claimed all of this, they really did not control much of the north. They had a few forts and some missions that would, on occasion, get obliterated by the Comanche. So clearly a giant sea in the north is going to change that. If the southern coast of this new Mediterranean had a large population to begin with, then the Spanish perhaps would have conquered this land and absorbed them in. As funny as it sounds, I really don't know how much this alternate Mediterranean might change Spain's imperial ambitions. They kind of controlled so much already. The biggest way that the new Mediterranean might change New Spain's history is it would give Mexico a very prominent sea border. For Spain, the idea of a Northwest Passage wasn't a very important thing, considering they controlled all of this. They would already have ships sailing from Mexico all the way to Asia, landing in the Philippines. The ones who really cared about a Northwest Passage weren't the Spanish or Portuguese, it was the French and British. In this alternate timeline, both kingdoms would be absolutely delighted. The Northwest Passage is real and goes right through the continent. Assuming that nothing drastically changes the early start of colonization, I'm gonna just assume that France still calls dibs on the St. Lawrence River, creating New France, and England still has angry Puritans that want to get away from the Anglicans and Dutch. Also, there's Jamestown. While the specific tribes that the French and British interact with in this alternate America are entirely different, there are still natives that in some way they interact with, and eventually fight. For France, the biggest change to their colonial empire is that instead of having a river to venture down, they have the Eastern Mediterranean. If I could imagine the French setting up shop anywhere, it would probably be here. A sister fort, in a way, to Detroit. Perhaps New France in this alternate timeline is a series of forts dotting Anatolia and Greece. Then these forts connect to the forts in the Great Lakes, leading out to the St. Lawrence River. So many questions to be raised. Does the 7 Years' War still kick off because George Washington somehow starts a skirmish in Turkey? Would the French have had a better shot at defeating the British if they controlled the sea to the west? Perhaps the French set up shop on this Mirror Cyprus, and then after the war the English just deport the entire population. Either way, Britain gets Cyprus. Just for fun, let's assume that the 13 colonies as we know them still are formed and even rebel. I just want to talk about the United States, okay? Manifest Destiny in this alternate timeline is a far more nautical venture. If you think about it, the 13 colonies would be this strange strip of land surrounded by ocean on multiple sides. Now, while naval travel is relatively easier than going by land, this is not some easy venture. For one, rivers are natural highways, and there are no rivers here. Instead, this is a vast sea that the colonists now have to cross. Even if they go by the coastlines, this is still a dangerous act, as American privateers and the Navy attempt to invade and conquer island native tribes, like the still salty British. Would they have ever given up such valuable real estate like Cyprus or Crete? Maybe these islands just remain thorns in the American side. How does this alternate United States view itself? I could see the Americans viewing themselves as the Greeks of the New World, creating colonies across the sea just as the Greeks did thousands of years ago. So I can imagine this new Mediterranean being dotted with a bunch of counterpart cities. Like, there is certainly going to be a New Jerusalem in western Georgia. If I was writing a book about this alternate world, I would imagine some 19th century American city, and then on like the island of Rhodes, they have the city of New Rhodes or something, with their own colossus on it. Maybe historically this island was a French colony before being taken over by the British. Then after the Revolution, it was handed over to the Americans. And now it became a hub for all new Mediterranean traverses. Get to work, Turtle Dove. Let's be honest, Americans were already pretty in on the whole Rome/Greece LARP in our timeline, so you just know they're gonna be all in on it here. It's fascinating imagining what alternate wars might come from this. Like, would the US ever invade Mexico? Like in our timeline, the Mexicans invited Anglo settlers into Texas to populate the region and ward off the Comanche. But here, the Comanche don't exist. Texas is just a strip of land. If America, say, ever did try to invade Mexico, it would come up across a populated northern coast. My main point here is that water creates borders, and it's entirely possible that even by the end of the 19th century, the United States is still mainly in the east, with small colonies in the west. Maybe there's a fertile North Italy state that has a history of fighting off the hill tribes south and north of them. Perhaps the United States took over the Strait of Santa Maria from the Spanish, forming an alternate LA. The valley still exists. It would probably be more important than ever without the vast farmland of the central US. Michigan and Ohio would be crucial for the nation to feed itself, and assuming they do colonize it, California and northern Italy are as well. After its initial conquests, the US was essentially a geographic island, keeping other European powers out of its hemisphere. Yet in this alternate timeline, I can imagine the United States taking far longer to colonize this land. The United States might be a nation still trying to vie for control within this new Mediterranean, competing against perhaps even the British, who would still want a piece of this pie. Keep in mind, this is the Northwest Passage. North America would historically be a highway for every European power to sail through. When you first look at this map, you might imagine the new Mediterranean being an American lake, but it might not be. Through centuries of alternate history, European colonization of certain islands might not make this so easy to take over. Alternate North America might be like any other continent. A large landmass that the United States is simply one player in. Maybe the idea of the United States doesn't even exist at all. Instead, any colonists that do go across the sea simply become foreign to one another. Almost as foreign as Britain is to America today. The new Mediterranean might be dotted with Anglo colonies that once shared a history, but thanks to distance and water, they're slowly drifting further apart. The same goes for France, or the Netherlands too. Maybe this new Mediterranean allows for the little guys to have their own pointless colonies. Maybe these colonies grow into nations in their own right. Perhaps the native nations in Italy or the Balkans do survive into the 20th century and establish themselves on the continental stage. There's so many ways you can take this really dumb map. And you know, I didn't want to be safe. So much goes into research and being correct that oftentimes I forget that this is just historical fanfiction. This is the closest I've gotten to one of those PowerPoint videos in a long time. Going back to my roots. This is Cody of Alternate History Hub. Special thanks to Rewriting History, Possible History, and US of Z for going along with this. If you want to check out their videos, then the links are in the description. Okay, bye.